Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the AAS YouTube channel. And this is part of the good stuff. This is the Sky and Telescope author series. And I'm super happy to have Ron Brecher with us today. Hey, Ron.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Where is your geolocation? Where are you at?
I'm just north of Guelph, Ontario, which is a little town. I say a little town, but it's about 100,000 people. And it's about an hour west and a little bit north of Toronto.
Okay.
And of course, what's really important is my Bortle sky quality. And it's around a 4.
Okay, very nice.
I have an auto mall a couple of kilometers to my immediate south. So I have observatory walls and trees to prevent me from shooting that part of the sky.
Very good, very good. So besides telescopes, it looks like you like to play guitar a little bit. I see a number of guitar cases back there.
Yeah, there's a pile of them over my left shoulder, and there's a stand with a couple of guitars in it over my right shoulder.
Very good.
So I've played guitar since I was about 10 or 12 years old. I play in an R&B band called The Exceptions, 5-piece R&B band.
Okay.
But since the pandemic, I've been playing a lot more acoustic, which was my first love.
Mm-hmm.
And I've actually got a YouTube channel where
I've been
posting a song every Sunday.
Oh, very
trying
good.
to be inspirational in crazy times.
Send me after this video ends, go ahead and send me the link, and I like to put people's web presence in the description below the video. So go ahead and send that to me, and I'll put your YouTube channel on it.
I also wear a Hawaiian shirt every Friday.
Clearly.
Today is Wednesday, and this morning when my wife and I were having coffee, she looked at my shirt and said, "What day is it?" And I said, "It's Wednesday." And she was all discombobulated. So that led to kind of an amusing Facebook post.
Oh my gosh. I was going to say, well, somewhere in the world it's Thursday, but Friday is a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
But all good. All good. So Ron, what do you like to do in astronomy?
Well, I guess I have my foot in the visual camp and in imaging. Mm-hmm. Most people would know me as a deep sky imager. I love to do deep sky imaging, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. But my first love and continuing love is visual observing. There's nothing like I want to say sensation, I guess, the feeling of the photons kind of entering your eye after such a long trip. One thing to do it with a camera, and it's awesome to be able to share that with people during the day and people who don't want to get up a ladder at night, you know.
Yeah.
But I love the visual experience, and just in the last few nights, I've been out looking especially at Jupiter and Saturn and waiting for Mars. So. Yep.
When did you get into astronomy?
I got into astronomy about 1998, and it's kind of an interesting story. 3 legs to that stool, if you like. Sure. So the first was we moved out to a new house in the country and changed banks as a result. The old bank, when we were closing out all our accounts, they said, well, you have all these Visa points. Let us send you something. So I ordered from their catalog, and one of the things I ordered was a little telescope for my 3-year-old son. I thought it was a toy, but it turned out it was a 4.5-inch reflector on a really rickety mount. So we'll come back to that in a minute. So that was the first part. So I was able to see Saturn and Jupiter and Jupiter's moons and our moon, which all of it blew me away, but it was a really rickety mount and the experience wasn't great. So then the second thing that happened is my daughter was born, and she was colicky. She screamed for the first year. Okay. And what settled her down is I'd put her over my arm and walk her up and down the driveway at night.
Okay.
And I'm in this new house with a new dark sky or darker sky, and I just kind of got hooked on the stars.
Awesome.
So I've got the telescope, I've got the walking up and down and getting hooked on the stars. So then at Christmas that year, my business partner gave me the book Night Watch by Terence Dickinson. Mm-hmm. Chapter 4, Choosing and Using a Telescope. There's a sidebar article called Junk Scopes from Asia. with a picture of my telescope on it, right? So I realized that it wasn't me, it was the telescope that was the problem in terms of my ability to see more. And I took my bonus money, it was Christmas, as I said, I took my bonus money from that year, and I dropped it all on a Celestron Ultima 2000 8-inch Schmidt Cassegrain computerized,
Awesome.
and a couple of nice Teleview eyepieces. And so there's been no going back. I mean, I've bought and sold many scopes. Now I have a 20-inch Obsession and a 10-inch homemade Dob that I use for my visual.
So did your children get the bug?
Somewhat. They like to come out and look when I've got something interesting in the eyepiece, but they're not really interested in being outside, you know, the whole experience of setting up, being out there while you're waiting for dark, and finding and looking at objects and then talking about it the next day is all a bit maybe too much.
All good. So that is going to lead us to this really lovely Sky and Telescope article, where we go from a rickety mount not to get to your second one to now you're stacking him on double vision. And Ron, take us away.
Yeah, so if you've read any of my writing before, you know that without kind of complaining about it, I'm very aware of how limited imaging time is due to a whole variety of different things, whether it's, you know, the weather where you are, or family commitments, or equipment problems. All of those things kind of conspire against being productive as an imager. And I had 2 telescopes and 2 cameras for a long time. I just had one of them mounted. But at some point, I think it was about a year ago, I received a Prima Luce Eagle 3 Pro. And if you could just scroll down to the top of the next page for a second, you can see that setup. There's the red computer. It's actually located in between the 2 telescopes. It turns out that in addition to being a PC that's useful, you know, does all my imaging control, it's also good for mounting hardware. And I've actually got the Takahashi bolted to it in a couple of tube rings. Nice. So receiving that hardware and having 2 cameras and 2 good refractors gave me a good opportunity to see what I could do putting them together. I've used a lot of different setups in the past, and none of them really would have allowed me to do this. And the reason is I'm using 2 refractors here, as I go on to say elsewhere in the article. It's difficult to do if you're using either a refractor and a reflector. One has diffraction spikes and the other one doesn't. Or if you're using 2 reflectors, it's very difficult to get the diffraction spikes properly aligned. So 2 refractors is kind of an ideal situation. And with the image scale that I get with these particular cameras and these particular scopes, it works really well. The first heading is it's all about the mount, and I can't really stress that enough. Anybody getting into astrophotography, anybody who's gone through astrophotography knows that you need to get a mount that's bigger than you think you need, because your equipment is, or your desire for larger equipment, heavier equipment, or more equipment is going to evolve over time. And mounts are very expensive. It's really expensive to buy, sell, and buy. So the gradual upgrade path for a mount is quite expensive. When I was ready for a serious mount, I was carrying about a 30-pound telescope, and I got a mount that was rated for 90 to 100 pounds. Okay. So my mount is a Paramount MX. It's been superseded by the MX Plus, which has a few advantages over this mount and a slightly larger payload. But this mount I've been running since 2013. It can carry this payload easily and more. If you read my write-ups on all the images I take, I don't guide with this setup. So the large telescope is shooting at about 1.1 arc seconds per pixel. and I can shoot 10 minutes without guiding and get round stars.
Very nice.
So the mount is really not being stretched for capacity, and that's by design. Make sure that you get a really solid mount. I think the other thing people have to think about is when you're sizing that mount, don't just think about the telescope. You have to think about all the things that attach to the telescope, and keep the telescope attached to the mount. So all the mounting hardware, in my case, in this image, cameras, field flatteners, cables, tube rings, and a computer, focus motors, focus controller on the very top there. So all of that stuff adds weight that you have to take into account when you're making a decision about the mount. You can scroll down to the next page. We've talked a little bit about optical choices.
Let me ask one question. How much?
Yeah, sure.
Out of curiosity, what does a mount like this run?
For cost,
Yeah,
I think it's when I bought it, it was $9,000. It's very slightly more now. I want to say 9,300, but they're advertised in every edition of Sky and Telescope and other magazines.
Okay.
And the one that they're selling now, as I told you, is an upgrade compared to my mount. So I have the Paramount MX.
Okay.
This is what's being sold now. The replacement for this mount is the MX Plus, which is a little bit more capable.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
No problem. So I talked a little bit about optics, particularly the idea that you want to use a couple of different refractors rather than a refractor and a reflector, or two reflectors. You could also use any kind of optical system that doesn't have a secondary vane support. So you could use, for example, a Maxitov Newtonian type system where the secondary is supported inside a lens. You could use a Schmidt-Cassegrain system. I've had many fine Celestron Schmidt-Cassegrain telescopes over the years. The real key is to avoid telescopes that give you diffraction spikes if you're doing this sort of dual imaging. The other thing I found is, because it's really hard to get both telescopes to point exactly at the same place, it's good if one telescope has a significantly larger field of view than the other. You can see this at the bottom left here, where that top image that's in color, that's the view from the Takahashi with the one-shot color camera.
Okay.
So I'm shooting low resolution color, and then below it, high resolution luminance with the other camera. I should say higher resolution. If you want to compare image scales, I'm at about 2.6 arc seconds per pixel for the color image, and about 1.1 arc seconds per pixel for the mono image. So that's very much consistent with the kind of practice you see with 4 mono filters, where the RGB would be shot binning the pixels 2 by 2 to make larger, more sensitive pixels, not worried about resolution in that case. And then you use a high resolution luminance. So I'm in essence doing the same thing, but I'm doing it with a one-shot color. And the cool thing is the amount of light that you gather. So in the very short winter nights, summer nights that I've been shooting the last few months, I can still get up in the morning and have 7 or 8 hours of data. It's crazy.
Wow.
And now, so it's September 15th as we're recording this, and I can shoot for about 8 hours now. I get up in the morning, I've got 15 hours of data. So this is a great way to make use of those really, really good nights. Why don't you scroll down, please, to the next page?
Okay, we got.
Okay, so the top image here just shows kind of how I do it software-wise. So I run all of my equipment, all of my imaging runs with the SkyX. So what does that entail? Well, it entails the mount, first of all, and you can see the virtual mount in the window at bottom left in the top graphic.
Yep, right here.
Next to it is the auto guider window.
Yes.
I told you I don't auto guide, but I did for this particular screenshot so that I could show you all of the different elements. The next window to its right is a 10-minute luminance sub on a galaxy that I'm going to show you in a moment. And to its right is a one-shot color 3-minute image from the Takahashi, same object. Final window to the bottom right is Ccd Commander, which is basically my scripting software.
Mm-hmm.
So some people use the SkyX LTI, which allows you to do a lot of the same scripting things, but there's some features in Ccd Commander that I like to use. And so I write a little script for every night of imaging that tells all the equipment what to do and when, and in what order. So now let's look at the main windows at the top of this graphic. So the big window on the left is the first instance of the SkyX. That's controlling the mount, the camera that's on the large telescope, its focuser, and the auto guider. At top right, there's a second instance of the SkyX running.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically just a secondary, it's just taking pictures all night. So it's connected to the second camera and the second focuser. And I just tell it to take 3-minute pictures all night long and focus every 6 subs.
Okay.
And so the only issue that can come up with this is that the cameras don't finish their exposures at the same time. And I like to dither. Dithering is when you move the telescope a little bit between exposures.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I do is I dither between exposures on the big scope.
Okay.
So I'm dithering the luminance. The chrominance, so the little scope with the one-shot color, it's automatically getting dithered every few frames that way.
Oh, okay. All right.
And there's an occasional frame that will have elongated stars because the dither happened during the exposure. I just delete that frame.
Mm-hmm.
The other kind of cool thing that you can do here is you can present objects at 2 different scales. So the image that you see at the left, bottom left here, it shows NGC 6914. That's the blue features in the image. And you can see it in context near some of the objects around Saturn and around, you can see the Propeller Nebula top left there.
Mm-hmm.
So this is all in Cygnus. What I did though is I then took this color base and I applied hydrogen alpha from the Esprit, the larger scope, to it.
Okay.
So it's a much narrower field of view, but now we get to see a close-up on that lovely blue reflection nebula, NGC 6914, and all of the red features around it also show more detail. So it's not always a case of just doing the 2-scope thing. Sometimes you want to present it both ways.
Yeah.
I do that as well with dark nebula, Barnard's E, for example. M11 open clusters sometimes look good close up and far away, but, depending on what's around them.
Very cool. That is really
Okay, let's go down to the next page.
Do you run both instantiations of SkyX on a laptop, or do you have something more substantial you run that on?
Could you scroll up, please?
Oh, yeah.
Everything is running on one computer. Okay. And scroll right up to the top. Keep going. There's the computer. The red box between the telescopes is the computer.
Ooh.
It's a Prima Luce Lab Eagle 3 Pro.
Got it.
It's an i5 processor, 500 gig hard drive. I think it's 8 gigs of RAM.
Okay.
And it's perfectly capable, more than capable, of controlling all my equipment. It also has the, well, actually, you can scroll down now and I can show you a couple of the features of that computer. So I just remote into it from any computer or from my phone. Bottom right here, you can see Rogelio Bernal Andreo's setup. So he takes kind of a different approach to me. He's got 2 identical refractors, 2 Takahashi FSQ 106, with 2 identical cameras. And he might shoot luminance with one, or H alpha with one, and RGB with the other.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's going to get still twice as much light, but he's just taking a different approach than I'm taking.
Okay.
If you could just scroll up a little bit, please, to the top of this page. I wanted to talk about the mounting type, side-by-side versus tandem.
Yes.
So the first thing I wanted to say is I haven't tried it both ways. I've only tried it piggybacked. You can see that Rogelio's got them side-by-side.
Mm-hmm.
Well, both of us get great results. So Rogelio's doing it side by side. I'm doing it with the piggyback setup, both getting great results. So obviously, it's not just how you set it up. There's a whole bunch of other things that are important. And probably the most important is balance and things like cable management, how cables move with the mount, all of that affects balance. And I think this article, gives a reference to the June 2019 Sky and Telescope, where I wrote an article about getting your mount properly set up, getting your equipment properly set up. I talked a little bit about guiding challenges and the issue with dithering and so on. So I always guide based on the higher resolution. I dither based on the higher resolution. I use a small dither. That means my RGB is not as well dithered, but that's okay. I can still use things like cosmetic correction in PixInsight to remove any residual warm pixels that are left after image calibration.
Okay.
I've already talked a little bit about the control software, or I've talked a bit about the control software that I use, which is the SkyX, but there are other options. And one that I wanted to mention is Nina. This is this relatively new free software. You can find it online. I have a number of friends using it. I haven't tried it myself. Some like it very much and have switched to it as their main imaging software. And one of the cool things about Nina is that it can synchronize 2 cameras, which will get around that dithering issue. So what Nina can allow you to do is to run a second instance of the software and to have the first instance trigger both exposures.
Okay.
So that means when one camera finishes, it won't start again until the other one finishes and downloads, and then they both, and dithers, and then they both start again.
Nice.
So that's obviously an option as well. I did point out, don't think of this as being really daunting to set up. It's not twice as hard as setting up a single scope system. If you can get a single scope system running really well, and you really understand how to get your mount running well, because that's the key. Controlling everything else isn't twice as hard. It's just a little bit harder. You do end up with way more data, and sorting through all of that can get a little bit silly. So if I'm shooting narrowband and RGB over 3 nights, I can get 15, 20 hours of 5-minute subs in the one-shot color while I'm collecting that narrowband data. So maybe that's overkill, but I'd rather collect it and then delete the inferior subs if I don't need them later. We all have delete keys. So I think that's all I wanted to say about that part. Can you scroll down a little bit more?
I will.
Yeah, so here's where I talked a little about the Nina software on the left, and I gave a link to it. And to the right, this shows the Eagle, the Eagle control software that came with that PC that I'm using. And a couple of things I want to point out. First of all, is it powers all my other devices. So in this case, the green tabs to the far right, you can see that I have one camera and one focuser turned on. The middle one isn't turned on. You can see I've got 12 volt in at the top. And then if you look at the ports A, B, C, D at the top of the red box, thank you very much. Those are my USB 2 ports. You can see what's plugged into them. And the really nice thing, no, further to the right, A, B, C, D, DCBA.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, so those are USB 2 ports.
Got it.
And the nice thing about the USB 2 ports is I can turn them on and off in this software. What that means is that when it's -30 out, I don't have to go outside to unplug a USB cable for a device that got hung up. I'll just turn the power to it off and then turn it back on. It's equivalent to plugging it in or unplugging it and plugging it back in.
Nice.
Now, to the left of that, you see 2 more USB ports, and they're mirrored on the underside of this graphic, 2 more of them. Those are USB 3 ports. You can't turn them on and off,
okay,
but they are very fast, of course. The gray window to the right side of the graphic that says 40.3 watts, that tells you the total power consumption. And if I was using a battery, it would tell me how many hours, how many amp hours I had left of power. Ports 5, 6, and 7 at the bottom there, those are for dew heaters. So you can see I've got a dew heater on each of the 2 telescopes, and I've got them set differently. The large gray box that says Echo to the left there, that's for a controller for the dew heaters. I don't have one, but it's another Prima Luce accessory that works with the Eagle and allows you to keep the temperature of your optic at a prearranged differential above or below the above the ambient temperature.
Mm-hmm.
So it just gives you finer control on that dew heater, and that might, if you're using a battery particularly, that might be important in helping you to regulate your power. And again, I can access this from my phone, my iPad, the computer that I'm talking to you on now. And if you scroll to the bottom of the page, you can see a couple of other images that were produced exactly the same way. And what's particularly interesting is so NGC 4236, which is the galaxy on the right, I had 34 hours of total exposure, but that was acquired in less than 19 hours over, I think, 3 nights.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Sure.
So again, I'm able to put all of the high resolution work to gathering luminance or hydrogen alpha, high signal, high quality data. And I can put the one-shot color on a very fine optic, the Takahashi FSQ106, to work gathering the color data to support that nice luminance or H alpha data.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
I think that's all I wanted to say about the article, except to thank you for inviting me to talk about it.
Sure. So let's talk about a little bit about the future. Maybe I noticed a little end there. Continuing ways to improve. So is the next article triple vision, quad vision, quad vision? Where
does it end?
Yeah.
It's not out of the question.
Okay.
If I was going to put anything else on, it would be a really small telescope, maybe a DSLR or something.
Mm-hmm.
But honestly, I don't really see the benefit of putting a third telescope onto the same mount. And the reason is I've already got all my bases covered. I've got a high quality lightness signal, whether that be through a luminance filter or hydrogen alpha or something else. And I've got the color to support it. And those of you who know my work, you know I'm mostly a natural color sort of person. I'm doing more narrowband these days, but I just don't see what a third telescope would add in terms of bandwidth to what I'm trying to do. If I was going to have a third telescope, it would be on a separate mount and pointed at another target. And then I wouldn't have 3, I'd have 4.
Right. double vision.
Double vision. Yeah. Then you can call me 4 Eyes.
I'm right there with you, Ron. It's very good.
Yeah, I hear you.
Cool. Well, that was awesome. That was really great. I don't want to thank you so much for your time today and walking us through your article and your setup, and that was great.
Oh, it was my pleasure. If anybody wants to see any of my stuff, it's at astrodoc.ca.
Yep, I got that one. That one will definitely be in the description. All right, everyone. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.